your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
I see you standing over the grave of another dead president.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, this week, as President's Day just passed and Lincoln's birthday is upon us, we thought in an election year, what a good time to tackle presidential horror. And it's not a deep category. It's not a category that's got a ton of movies. But I think we did what we always try to do and found two very diverse films that are completely different that hit on the President of the United States. What do you think of this topic?
Well, it's an interesting topic because, like you said, there's not a lot of these kind of movies, not a lot of presidential horror movies. You have plenty of thrillers and dramas that surround the Oval Office, right? But presidents represent the good of the people and the leader of the people that we believe to be like that holds like virtuous and righteous values that represent the country. And so to have that foundation shaken up, I think, is a good premise for a horror movie that's not often delved into.
Yeah, you could certainly make the case that I agree with all of your concepts and principles that you laid out. You could certainly make the case that that the greatest presidential horror is the real life that exists right now. It doesn't matter what side you're on. I think what we've declined to is a sad state of affairs from the standard that should be held and that used to be held.
You could spend years of college just studying that.
Yeah,
a lot of seminars, a lot of books.
Different podcast. That's not our wheelhouse,
right,
but
right.
That might be the greatest horror among us right there.
Interesting. Yeah.
Our movies this week, we start with an interesting movie because it's kind of an outlier in a lot of different ways. The Dead Zone, 1983, directed by David Cronenberg, and this falls right into a period of time where every horror director was taking a shot at a Stephen King property. You had Tobe Hooper do Salem's Lot, then you had John Carpenter do Christine, you had Louis Teague do Cujo, and then David Cronenberg slides into The Dead Zone, which is at the time also a bit of an outlier for Stephen King in that it's not pure horror.
Yeah, it's not exactly a horror so much it is a thriller, but it has horror elements to it. I haven't read the book. I have it. It's on my queue. But the concept behind it, I was listening to an interview with Stephen King, and he said that what he wanted to do was he had a concept that, what if the person who assassinated the president of the United States was actually a good person? Mm-hmm. Right? Because it's often a villain. And he's like, well, what if we flipped it on its head? And what if we created this scenario where we create this likable character that we get the audience to really like, and he ends up being the one that assassinates the president? And so you have this interesting dichotomy of an evil senator who's running for president, who's trying to become president, who's going to destroy the world, and then you have this good protagonist that's like this good guy who doesn't want to have to do it. And so it creates a lot of interesting aspects for the movie.
And there's an interesting line in there when John Smith is talking to a survivor of World War II. He asks him flat out, if you could go back and take out Hitler before any of this happened, would you? And he says, I'm a doctor. I'm sworn to help people, but I absolutely would. And it's a premise that Stephen King revisits many years later in 11/22/63, where a guy goes back in time to save JFK. It's a very similar premise that you see him explore very early on in his work here in this book, and then subsequently in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how you can see writers do that. They have this idea that they tinker with, and they have variations. They're trying to work something out in their mind, and so they write these different variations of it, which I love seeing that done.
It's like a brain itch that you can't scratch, and it just
keeps
showing up.
You keep getting this idea. It's like, I have another way to flesh it out. I have another way to flesh it out. And you see that with directors too. You'll see directors have a certain style that they're just kind of trying to hash something out,
The other reason this movie is an outlier in the David Cronenberg biography is because he's known for the goopy body horror.
Yeah.
His next film is Videodrome, which is very goopy and messed up, and then The Fly, which of course takes that to a whole nother level. This movie is very subdued. It's very it's well executed. It's well shot. It's well directed, but it's really an outlier because it's a straight tale.
That's a really good point about Cronenberg's style and how he had the discipline to kind of keep it how it was supposed to be.
Yeah, the other person who really is constrained in this film is Christopher Walken, plays our main character, John Smith. And Christopher Walken's known for being, completely over the top, maniacal, brilliant at what he does. But again, in this film, he's very subdued, plays it very straight, and does an excellent job.
Has a very soft touch. Yeah, it's kind of a different side. It's still Christopher Walken, right? But there's a lot more of a soft touch. He's trying to recover. He's still heartbreak from his fiance, so he's kind of like broken this whole movie. He's kind of sad.
Yeah, so John Smith, English teacher, goes on a date with his girlfriend Sarah. He gets a headache when they're on a roller coaster, which is kind of a foreshadowing of things to come. He drops her off at home. They're serious. They discuss marriage, but he declines her invitation to stay. And with a great line that you probably wouldn't hear in 2024, he says, "Some things are worth waiting for."
Yeah.
And she asks him twice, "You want to come in? You want to stay the night?" And he's like, "I'm going to go home." But it's a heavy rainstorm and the roads are bad. But he heads home in the rainstorm. And here we have one of my few complaints with the film. We have the stereotypical truck driver falls asleep. That's just such an easy thing to rely on, having worked in the transportation field for over 30 years. Like, it happens, but it's so rare that it shouldn't be the stereotype that it is.
It's in way more movies than it needs to be.
Yeah. This driver spills his tanker across the middle of the road, and John, with his vision being limited, crashes into it. It's a bad accident. He's banged up pretty bad, and he slips into a coma. He wakes up, healed, no bandages. He's very confused at this point, and they want to break it in easy to him. They bring his parents in, and my first thought was, they tell him, "You've been in a coma. 5 years has passed." My first thought was, wouldn't your parents look different 5 years later? Wouldn't you say, like, "Damn, you guys look old"?
Yeah, you'd immediately think that. Yeah, that's a very good point.
He also learns that Sarah, who he thought was the love of his life, is now married and has a small child. We first see something's up with John when a nurse is washing him, and he grabs her wrist, and he grabs it aggressively, and he's holding it tight. It almost seems like he's like going to harm her in some way.
It's almost like he seizes up on it.
Yeah. And it's tight, and he won't let her go. And he sees images of a little girl in a fire, and she's huddled in the corner and she's crying, and he opens his eyes and he tells the nurse that Amy is screaming. And she's like, "Well, Amy's my daughter's name." And he's like, "She's screaming and burning, but it's not too late."
And it's a cool scene because they show him in the bed on fire, like he's like inside that room. It's like it's cool.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. He gets immersed in his vision, like he's living it too.
Yeah,
which has got to be traumatic to experience
in itself. Yeah, having to do this is painful for him. Yeah.
But the firemen get to the house in time. Amy is rescued, and John has this interesting ability that could be helpful. That kind of sets the table for the rest of the movie.
The events that are going to start unfolding. Yeah.
He's in therapy he's taking physical therapy. He's also taking some mental therapy, emotional support for what he's gone through. And his doctor, Sam, he grabs Sam's wrist, and we see images from the Nazi occupation of Poland, where his mother sends him off in an escape vehicle, separating the family, but attempting to save her son's life. And it's kind of a cool scene. It's kind of like it sticks out from the rest of the movie because it's a World War II setting.
Yeah.
But when he opens his eyes, he tells Sam that his mother is still alive. and even tells her where she is and where he can find her. And impossible. He says that's simply not possible.
Right.
But he looks her up. He calls on the phone, and he hears his mother's voice, and he cries, but he's too emotional to speak back, and he hangs up. And I just thought that was a quick and easy way to just really add a layer of emotion to the movie.
It does actually, because you start to realize that this power is going to have the ability to affect people's lives, right? For the positive, right? So it's set up. The movie is set up for him to kill someone, but right now it's interesting that you see like, okay, he can affect people's lives in a positive way, which is again adding to the likability of his character. He's a good guy.
He's very likable. Agree. John calls a press conference because there's all this speculation about his abilities, and he tries to explain it away. And a super aggressive reporter won't let it go, and in fact comes up front where John is sitting and pushes him to touch him. And it turns ugly. John grabs his wrist and immediately starts talking about how the reporter's sister had killed herself, and kind of hinting that his aggressive behavior and mean behavior, maybe even abusive behavior towards her, pushed this to happen. And this is all during a press conference. So it takes an ugly turn.
Is that what you want to know? He's like grabbing his hand. Is that what you want to know? He's kind of freaking the guy out. He wants to like get away.
Yeah. So the guy like bolts out of there. It turns real ugly.
Yeah.
This all airs on the news, and John's mom gets very upset and has what appears to be a heart attack.
Yeah.
And he visits her, and she passes. Sheriff Bannerman then approaches John. He's at home with his dad, and he's looking for help with the Castle Rock murders. These have been ongoing for years. They don't have really any clues to speak of. They've not caught anybody. They don't have their eye on anybody, but he says, if you have this ability, it's a gift from God. And John kind of counters with a gift. And he relays all the awful things he's experienced and lost through this process.
It's a good scene.
It's a really good scene. And he said, if this is a gift, I don't want it.
Right. My life was ruined. I was hit by a truck. He's like, I was hit by a truck. What are you talking about? You don't. Yeah. I love the scene. I love the dialogue. It was great.
I lost my girl. I lost my mom. I lost 5 years of my life.
Yeah. And you want to give me a paycheck to come help you? Like, what are we talking about here? Yeah.
So he declines very emphatically. Sarah ends up visiting him with her son, Denny. And Sarah had visited him in the hospital, and there was kind of he had a great line where, he said, this is hard for me. I understand it's been 5 years for you. I don't blame you, but it's been a day for me. We were on a date yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just a great perspective.
It would be a shock, right? Like it's you're down, you get up, it's 5 years later. It's like your emotions haven't changed towards anyone. Yeah. And you find out the person you were supposed to get married to has a kid with somebody. That'd be devastating.
For sure. So she puts the boy to sleep on the bed. He's like 10 months old, and she approaches Johnny, and she's unbuttoning her shirt and saying, we missed out on this 5 years ago. Let's not miss out on it now. Yeah. And they have sex.
Yeah.
And she stays. His dad comes home. They have a really nice dinner, kind of like a small makeshift family. But then she leaves and tells him, it's not going to happen again. This was a one-time thing. And it's kind of, I don't know, I almost felt like that makes it worse. That makes it harder to accept and move on.
It actually does make it worse. But, things like that happen in real life all the time. It happens to people, and feelings get mixed up in the wrong, and it happens. So it's kind of realistic. People do that all the time.
Yeah.
They put themselves in situations emotionally they shouldn't be in.
Yeah. Only self-harm. You can't help yourself sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That night, Castle Rock Killer is on the news. Another victim has been found. And based on what happened that day, the time with Sarah, the dinner with Dad, he's in a different place mentally. And he says, you know what? I'm going to help. There's, to me, the best, and this isn't really a visual movie. But there's this great visual scene of this long, dark tunnel. and it's lit at the end by police lights, and it creates this beautifully elongated, shadowy tunnel scene that I thought was just spectacular.
I had the same exact thing in my notes. I said that's the best shot in the movie,
Yep.
like visually. Yeah, the same thing.
And all they find is a pack of smokes, a pack of Marlboro, and Johnny holds it, and he's closing his eyes trying to get a feel, but it's nothing. Well, they're kind of like, geez, too bad this didn't work out. A call comes in on the radio. They have another fresh victim. So Sheriff Bannerman and his main deputy, Frank Dodd, they take Johnny with them to this call. And when they get there, it's a girl's up on a gazebo. It's wintertime. It's cold. But Johnny reaches down and they uncover her, and he grabs her hand. And we get to witness her murder. He sees the whole scene unfold. And it's kind of weird because it's painful to watch, but he has to watch it long enough to see the face. Yeah. And we keep seeing glimpses, and then he's squeezing his eyes, and it's difficult. But he finally witnesses the face turns, and it's Deputy Frank Dodd. And he finally lets go, and he's like, it's Dodd. It's Dodd. I saw his face. I saw the whole thing. And he's kind of lamenting the fact that he was there and couldn't help.
Yeah.
I did nothing. When it's not, it wasn't really a live situation, but
he suddenly has that grief. I mean, he just experienced a murder, and he's internalizing what he just saw and realizing he couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, further emotional toll that this gift has on him.
Which is a good theme for this movie. They keep replaying that. I mean, he's still trying to struggle coming out of a coma and losing losing his fiance. And on top of that, he's got to deal with all these other people's dramas as well. So he hasn't even healed himself.
Yeah. They go to look for Dodd, like, hey, where is he? And they say, oh, he drove off in your car, Sheriff. So Dodd's on the run. Yeah. Sheriff Bannerman and John go to Dodd's house. And we're watching this. I said, I don't think they would bring him. Like, they wouldn't bring him to this part. But he's there. And as they're going in, as they enter the room, he lives with his mom, Frank Dodd does, and she touches Johnny, or Johnny touches her arm on the way through the doorway, and he stops and he says, "You knew. You were protecting him, but you knew," which just adds a layer of twist to this serial killer.
Yeah. How much were they hiding? Yeah, but you know what? No, thinking about it, they could bring him along as a specialist, right? They could say, hey, he's a specialist for this thing. I mean, he does have psychic abilities, right? So I think maybe they'd make the exception.
Yeah, but he's found the killer. Now the killer's on the run. Like, you need an experienced cop there, not him. But
100%. You're right.
It fits the story, though, because you get the depth of finding out the mom knew, which just adds that layer to it. Yeah. Sheriff Bannerman goes upstairs, and he breaks into the door, and Frank Dodd has killed himself. Impaled himself on scissors through his nose and mouth.
That was the most bizarre way to commit suicide I've ever seen in a movie.
I'm watching him plant the scissors on the side, and he's getting ready to shove his face into him. And I'm thinking, they're not going to stick. They're just going to fall to the ground. You're going to look like a fool with a cut on your nose.
Yeah, or your lips and stuff. I just didn't get that one. I don't know how. I'd rather have something like fall on me than to like land on something. I don't know.
Yeah, and the scissors were somewhat symbolic because he had used them in the murders before. So he kind of full circled and took himself out.
I feel like this would be easier.
Yeah, a lot of things would be easier. As they're trying to leave, Dodd's mom brings out a shotgun, and she shoots John in the side, and Sheriff Bannerman is forced to gun her down and kill her. John's fine. Just went right through his side. He's okay, but he moves away. And we only find this when his doctor Sam finds him. He's physically getting worse. The psychic ability is taking a toll on his body. But it has both a physical and mental cost every time he uses it. And he shows Sam a room full of thousands of letters from people looking for his help. A lost cat, a lost kid, a recently deceased loved one. Everybody wants his help with their problems. And all these things are just weighing on him. He makes a living now by tutoring. We know he was an English teacher before. And a man named Roger shows up at his house and hires him to tutor his troubled son, Chris. And this is where the movie kind of takes a turn. He visits the home to meet Chris. And as he's entering, he meets Greg Stilson, loudmouth, brash, bold candidate for Senate.
Martin Sheen. Yeah.
It's so funny because, boy, he sure personality-wise seems like somebody we have in predominantly in politics today.
Yeah. A nationalist, all right, a populist, right? Yeah.
And this is in 1983. It's just so uncanny that the similarities. But Roger warns him that this Stilson might be dangerous. He says, "Well, why are you meeting with him? And this guy's rich. Roger's rich, so Stilson wants his support, wants his money, and he says, well, look, you don't want to get too close. If he loses, he'll drag you down with him, but you don't want to push him away too hard because if he wins, you don't want to be on the outs."
Yeah, just kind of being sleazy as well.
Yeah, you think about the politicking that goes on in the world, and he thinks the guy is awful, but he doesn't want to say it.
Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. I don't know.
Yeah. So he meets the kid Chris. He builds a bond with him quickly. They start having a really successful relationship. He's tutoring him successfully. One day he's tutoring him at his house, and he gets a knock on his door, and it's a campaigner for Stilson. A guy shows up at his door, and he's like, "Well, let me get you some campaign material." And he calls to his wife, who runs up, and it's Sarah. So Sarah and her husband, who he had never met, are campaigning for Stilson. So when they leave, John's a little upset because, again, face to face with Sarah, he's still not over that hurt. And he kind of puts his arm around Chris. Like I said, they have a really good bond. He just kind of wraps him up and he gets the support from the kid. But he has a vision of Chris and other hockey players falling down through this frozen water and drowning. And he says, "We got to go." He immediately takes Chris home. And he's flipping out to Roger. "You got to cancel this hockey tournament. You can't do it. I've seen it. It's going to be a disaster. The ice is going to break." And he's going bananas. And they argue. And Roger tells him, "Look, I don't want you around my kid anymore." The kid says, I'm not doing the hockey thing. So he says, "Fine, the hockey's canceled, but you're not his tutor anymore. I want you out of here. Your last check will be sent to you." On his way out, he touches Chris. And he has no vision, saying, "Okay, he's going to be okay now."
He's changed the future, right?
He's changed the future, which is a pivotal moment in his evolution with this ability. But Roger lied. Once John has left, he goes into Chris's room and he's telling him, "Yeah, I just told that to get rid of him. We're doing the hockey tournament. Let's go. We're still going to do this." Chris won't go. He's like, "No, I'm out."
He's just sitting at his computer. He's like, "Nope."
He's like, "Fine. You want to stay in your room? Stay in your room. All your friends, we're going." So he takes the kids to this hockey tournament that he's sponsoring and putting on, and we cut to Johnny picking up a newspaper where 2 kids died because the ice broke and they fell through and drowned.
Yep.
And it's but Chris wasn't one of them, which was an important piece because Johnny realized he can impact what he sees.
Yeah,
we got a glimpse of that with the fire, and the girl at the beginning.
It starts to become definitive, like you said.
So there's a rally for Stilson, and it's taking place in the park right across from John's house. He's looking out the window, and he kind of really doesn't leave his house. He keeps to himself, but he sees Sarah over there. So he decides to go over, and he's in this big crowd, and Stilson shows up. And he's pushing through the crowd, and he's shaking hands, and it's he's politicking, he's kissing babies, the whole 9 yards.
Campaigning, yeah.
And when he gets to Johnny, he shakes his hand, and Johnny has a vision. And he kind of grabs his hand tight. He has that like tremor like he did with the nurse at the beginning.
Yeah, he sees up.
And he sees Stilson as president of the United States. And he sees him mad, power hungry, bullying people around. And he's pushing
out of his mind.
Button. Yeah. And he's pushing the button to start World War III and celebrating it.
Yeah. He's like, this was my destiny. I was chosen to do this. Like he's out of his mind, right?
It's like, we'll go down in history, General.
Yeah, you'll go down his. Yeah, he's like very evangelical, about it. It's psychotic.
So now John's left to struggle with this, knowing what he knows. What can he do about it? And he knows he can change the future. So he goes and he gets a rifle and some ammo, and he takes a bus and he goes to Stilson next campaign stop. And it's in kind of a like a convention center, a small town hall kind of setting. And he hides out in the balcony before the speech. And he's hiding behind the banners and everything. Tilson comes in, and Sarah and her husband are there, and he brings Sarah and Denny up on stage with him, which I'm like, oh, here we go. People he cares about are in the mix. When Stilson gets up to start talking, John stands in the balcony, points the rifle at him, and Sarah yells his name and points at him, Johnny, causing him to miss. Stilson turns and grabs the boy. He grabs the baby Denny from Sarah's hands and holds the child out in front of him for protection.
The most lunatic thing. Yeah.
The police shoot John. He falls from the balcony down to the floor below. Stilson comes over to him and grabs him. He's like, "Who are you? What are you doing?" And he has a vision.
Yeah.
And this vision is he sees the cover of Newsweek with Stilson holding the baby out, completely destroying this campaign or any future political aspirations he may have. He's done. He's toast. And then we see Stilson in a mad state of despair kill himself.
It just puts a gun right under his chin. Yep.
And John tells him it's over because he knows it is. And
he's got a little bit of a smile, like like he's satisfied. He's like, I can die happy. I did, I saved the world.
And he really met his objective, not exactly as he intended. Sarah comes to him. He's laying there. He's close to death, and asks him why. He doesn't bother to really answer because it's pointless at this point to tell her she was campaigning and supporting a madman, and who knows if she would believe him anyways. So he just tells her goodbye, and the last line is she tells him that she loves him. Yeah. And it's a thriller, as you said. It's really an emotional drama on many levels.
It really is. Yeah.
It's we got done and we were talking about it. My wife goes, there's some horrific things, but you cannot classify this as a horror movie.
No, I agree. Yeah. I think a lot of the elements are horrific, but it's not a horror movie. I'd call it more of a thriller.
And that's where I met back when, at the time this came out, when Stephen King released this book. It's titled The Dead Zone. And that references a spot in Johnny's visions that he can't see past. Like he has blind spots.
They say that. Yeah, they say that earlier on in the movie. Yeah.
But at this point, we had only seen pure horror from Stephen King. So I think it was called that and advertised that to draw people in. But it's really a departure, and it really gets into where he evolved as a writer into these deep character studies with more depth than just straight pure horror. Not that he's not great at the horror, but the character depth has always been important for his writing.
And he's great at doing both. You could watch. I mean, Shawshank's one of my favorite movies of all time, and that's the furthest thing from a horror. I mean, it's another one of those things like Dead Zone. There's horrific elements to it where you think about a situation that would be like devastating to the human condition, right? And then you just kind of place these characters in these devastating emotional positions, which I think always ends up being relatable on some level, and that's where just Stephen King just thrives with that.
Yeah. Green Mile, Dolores Claiborne. There's several examples of that. Sure. Stand By Me, based on the body.
One of the 4 stories I was in there. Yep.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, that's our first presidential horror. Our second movie is a dramatic shift, as we always like to do. I love when we can do this.
I love it. I love when we do it. Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, from 2012, directed by Timur Bekmambetov. And this movie it's kind of nuts, but I'll tell you my favorite thing about this movie. I like this movie. I read the book by Seth Grahame-Smith when it came out.
It's a book.
Yep. He also wrote the screenplay, so he was very involved with it. I enjoyed it immensely, and I tell you what I like about it. They take this ridiculous premise, this completely crazy premise, and they play it straight. like like there's scenes in this movie you think you're watching the History Channel.
Yes. Yeah.
They play it completely straight the whole way. And I always,
There's
we love when we talk about like Bubba Hotep takes a ridiculous premise and goes over the top with the ridiculousness of it. This is kind of the opposite of that, where they're like, no, we're playing this straight. Like this is exactly what happened.
which is the best way to do it, a movie like this, right? Because they take this ridiculous premise, like you said, and then they have like serious presidential dialogue about where this country should be. Like they add, it's like they take this elements of like historical element of how it was, and then layer that with the ridiculous premise and say, let's just put those together. And I think it just meshes perfectly.
Yeah, and they also, I mean, this, for it's all its ridiculousness, they do kind of take the horror of vampires and the horror of slavery, and they kind of interconnect them as shared evil that are all part of the same greater tale. And I think I don't know, I thought it was kind of interesting.
It's clever. I remember when this trailer came out back, I think it was 2011, 2012, something like that. And I remember just seeing the name of the movie and going, I'm going to see that. I didn't even watch the trailer yet. I was like, I'm going to see this. Then I saw the trailer. I was like, it's exactly what I want it to be.
Yep.
He's swinging an axe and killing vampires. I was like, all right, I'm going to watch this.
We start with a young Abe protecting a black friend of his, Will, from a whipping on the docks. But his interference gets him a bit of a whipping and costs his father his job in the process. That night, his mother is bitten in her sleep, and young Abe is watching between the, it's a small one-room house that they live in. He's kind of watching over the edge of his bed, and he sees Jack Bart do it. But he also notices something weird about Jack Bart's eyes. He doesn't look quite human anymore.
Yeah.
His mom gets sick and dies, and his dad makes the boy promise, you're not going to do anything foolish. We cut to 9 years later. Abe is now a young man, and his father passes. But he's now free of that promise, and all he wants now is vengeance.
Yeah.
So he shows up on the docks late at night, and he shoots Jack Bart in the eye on the docks. And it's the old, the ball, like a musket ball.
The old ball musket, yeah.
Yeah, and he shoots him in the eye, and it sits there, and the man falls over.
Because we couldn't have a weekly episode without an eye, scene.
Absolutely. He turns to walk away, and he throws away his gun, but Bart's is not dead. He looks back, and he's gone. And he gets attacked by him as a vampire, full teeth bared, and he's just throwing him around, like just kicking the snot out of him.
It's a gnarly fight. There's like wood flying everywhere, and it's just like you can see they're it's like full power.
Yeah, one thing this movie did get credit for was it's very visually impressive. There's a lot of scenes that are just kind of cutting edge visual techniques that they used, and this was one of them. He's flying through the air, and you actually see the splintering wood in slow motion. Yeah. They did a lot of really cool visual stuff that I thought was, unique to the movie.
It's a very fun movie to watch.
Yeah. Abe wakes in a strange bed. We think he's toast, right? He's getting destroyed by this Jack Bart's, but he wakes in a strange bed, and he was rescued by Henry Sturge, a man he saw earlier in a bar. And Henry had commented that a man this drunk, has bad intentions.
Yeah, he wants to kiss a girl or kill a man, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And Henry tells him that he hunts vampires. And Abe convinces Henry to train him. And we get an oddly placed Rocky-style training montage where he's going through all these, different training skills. And we find Abe to be very proficient with an axe.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, of all the weapons, why not?
And he learns from Henry. Well, yeah, he learned he cannot tell a lie. Right. We learn from Henry that the slave trade is also used to feed the vampires. So again, that adds this.
They
This whole
tie it
thing
in.
is tied
Yeah,
together.
yeah. They tie, and it's funny. They'll find ways. They found little teeny ways. Like he's going to law school, like Abe Lincoln did. He has a son that dies. You know, Abe Lincoln lost some children at a young age. They were young. They have Mary Todd. Like it's kind of funny how they throw like random actual facts of his life into the movie, even though it's none of it's the rest of the movie's just outrageous.
And the book does the same thing. It takes real facts,
Real facts,
and then
yeah.
just interlaces this
Yeah.
made up mythology. And I thought it was interesting. I thought it was cool.
It's fun. I thought it's brilliant. Yeah.
Henry sends Abe off to Springfield, and he's got some vampires that need dispensing of there, and he sends him a name. Here's a name, and he has to go kill one, and here's another name, he has to go kill another. When Abe gets there, he gets a job and a room with a man named Speed. And when he's sent to kill vampires, he struggles at first. In fact, the first guy almost has him done. He's hung up by his feet, trapped, lost his axe, but he manages to get his blade out of his pocket just in time to slit the man's throat.
He's still a white belt. Takes years.
Yeah. He struggles at first, but he gets better and he gets deadlier as he kills more. So Abe ends up going to a ball with his friends and boss Speed, and while there he dances with Mary Todd, a young girl from town he's become quite smitten with. He falls for her pretty hard.
Yeah, and he's trying to swoon her as well. So
absolutely, he goes on killing vampires and dating Mary Todd. Even at a picnic one time, he tells her what he does at night because he's always tired, and she laughs and thinks he's joking. Of course.
Oh, Abe. Yeah.
And he thinks back to as they get closer and closer, he remembers Henry telling him that he could not have friends, family, that this life as a vampire hunter would preclude all of that. So he considers
he hears the voice again. Yeah.
Yeah, he considers sparing her and doing the best thing for her by leaving her alone. That's what he's thinking he really should do, but he's really falling for her hard. His childhood friend Will moves to Springfield, and together they get in a scuffle where Abe kind of protects his friend as he did at the very beginning of the movie. He gets a visit from Henry, who tells him that his nemesis, Jack Bartz, knows about Mary, and he finally sends him after him. He's always told him, you kill who I tell you to kill. This isn't about vengeance. This is bigger.
Right. And he's been saying, he says, I've been waiting for that one name and you haven't given it to me. And then he's like, well, this is it because she knows about Mary. Yeah. And like you said, this is when they kind of move forward with it.
So he goes after Jack Bartz, and there's a wild and elaborate chase scene. A lot of CGI. Some of it was a little wonky.
What it reminded me of was an 1800s version of what they tried to do, some radical version of, the fight on top of a moving train.
Yeah.
Like it's that, but horses. And it's in the 1800s.
Yeah. They're running across the tops of these full sprinting horses.
Flips and stuff. Yeah.
And it's okay. I know the movie's not realistic, but it was a little too much for me.
Yeah, that was my least favorite action scene in the movie. I was kind of like, this is like Michael Bay Transformers stuff, and I wasn't into it.
Yeah, agreed. But it's a long, elaborate chase scene, ends in an epic battle, where Abe finally kills Jack by having a gun hidden in the handle of his trusty axe that Jack thinks he's got him beat. And he pulls it open and blows him away through the head.
Yeah,
it's pretty
really like that.
It's pretty cool kill.
Yeah.
The leaders of the vampires, a guy named Adam and his sister Vidoma, become aware of Abe and become aware of him killing their kind. And we see a flashback to Adam killing Henry's wife and turning him. And Abe walks in on Henry in an alleyway, feeding from, and Henry, it looks like he only kills bad people because he stops a man from beating a woman and then feeds on him. But Abe learns that Henry is a vampire, And he also learns that the vampires can't kill each other. So Henry can't kill Adam or vice versa. So he kind of feels like he was a pawn in all of this because he can go after Adam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feels manipulated and betrayed by Henry a little bit.
He set him up. He's wanted to kill vampires, and he's been setting him up to train him to fuel his hatred in that direction. And it turns out he is one, so it kind of confuses him.
Yeah, for sure. So he leaves Henry and decides he's not going to take his advice. He proposes to Mary.
Right. Yeah. At this point, he's like, screw your values and the stuff you told me. You've been a vampire this whole time, dude. Like,
yeah, I can't trust you.
I'm ditching my life because of what I thought was righteous that you were giving me, and you're a vampire this whole time. So it's an interesting conflict at this point.
Yeah. At the wedding, Henry does show up, and he's like, well, what do you want? Why are you here? And he tells him he needs to be careful. The Adam is after him, and that's why he came. Just wants to give him that heads up. Well, Adam has his cronies grab Will and sends Abe an invitation to come to his plantation in New Orleans. So Abe and Speed go together to this plantation for a rescue, and they witness kind of a midnight ball where slaves and black people are all dancing with vampires, and on the word go, they all are fed upon. Male, female, doesn't matter.
Everyone, yeah.
And it just further emphasized that the slave trade is used as a feeding ground.
Yeah.
Will is in there, and Abe breaks in, and this was one of the best fight scenes. In a fighting flurry with his axe, he is battling vampires all throughout the plantation room.
It's one of the coolest scenes, yeah.
And he's doing double twists with his axe, and he's swinging them from behind, and it's it's pure action.
Yeah, it's almost like in Kill Bill when she's in the club and she's just fighting everyone, and it's just
the
just
crazy 88,
just fighting, just fighting everyone.
Yeah. And there's some cool decapitation scenes, and
yep.
But it's all very, I don't know, it's done in what seems to try to be like an artistic,
stylistic
manner. Yeah, perfect word. Thank you. It's not like pure hack 'em up
carnage. Yeah. It's almost like a ballet. Like everything's just kind of like the way it's choreographed and everything, the way they're moving. Yeah.
He finally gets caught. He gets trapped by Vedoma, and they want to turn him, and they want him to kill his friend Will. They want him to feed on him. And when we think all hope is lost, Speed crashes through the front door with a horse-drawn carriage, causing chaos and madness. And the three men, Speed, Abe, and Will, manage to escape in the carriage. And what I thought was kind of another cool historical inclusion, they escape using Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad to get back to the North.
Yeah, that's it. Again, they're putting a lot of that historical stuff in there. Like, well, here's how that fits in.
Yeah,
I mean, even the Battle of Gettysburg towards the end, right? They're kind of using it all. They use the Gettysburg address at the end.
Yeah. At this point, this is when Abe realizes that his fight against slavery is the same fight that he has against vampires, and he decides to use politics as his weapon. He's been kind of growing, in his legal world, and he's kind of been, in small town politics, and he decides this is his avenue to best fight this.
Yeah.
And Henry disagrees. Henry's telling him that, if you shut off slaves, that's what kind of keeps the vampires peaceful. So it keeps them at bay to a degree. Yeah. And Abe will have none of it. He can't sacrifice any life for this cause. So he ascends to president. The Civil War begins, and we have Abe and Mary have a son named William. He's struggling with the loss of life through the course of the war. We see he's aged a bit at this point. Time is obviously elapsed. But he holds firm. He issues the Emancipation Proclamation. And after he does that, Vedoma sneaks into the White House as a servant and bites young William, who dies infected just as he saw his mother die, and he knows what it is. The South has begun using, in cooperation with Adam, they've begun using vampires at the front lines in the battles, and they are winning.
Yeah. They can't kill them. They don't have the right weaponry, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to give up. This is a lost cause, except for Abe. He will not. And he's sitting at the table one day, and he picks up his fork and he says, aha, this is what we need. And he makes an order to collect all of the silver in the North.
Yeah. It was one of those lines I called out, and when I saw it, they're like, how much silver do you need? And I'm like, all of it. And then he says, all of it. And I'm like,
I did the exact same thing.
That's what I would have said.
all of it.
Yeah.
And so he's going to bring all the silver to Gettysburg, where the two forces are kind of at the battle point at this point. If the South moves any farther north, all hope will be lost. So it's kind of pivotal point in the war, as history would tell us.
Yep.
At this point, Speed, who's been kind of saying, this thing needs to end, all these people are dying, he seems to betray him, and he tells Adam about the plan to bring the silver down on the train. Meanwhile, he sends Mary off. He says, you got to get out of here. This isn't safe. She goes off with Harriet Tubman and through her secret channels. And Abe gets out his old trusty axe that he had put away years ago. And he makes this journey on the train full of silver. It's basically,
I like how he grabs it though, and he's kind of twisting it like it's gonna be this cool montage, and he drops it. He's a little rusty.
Yeah. Well, your skills diminish over time.
A little bit of comedy in there. Yeah, there's a little comedy here and there.
So on the train, it's just Abe, Speed, and Will to protect this silver. And Adam, of course, with his crew of vampires, attacks the train, and the men defend it, killing many vampires. You get the top of your train chase scene like you had talked about in the past. There's some cool kills up on the top of the train.
Yeah.
People get nearly caught and just get away. It's pretty action packed.
There's always, I don't know why, whoever, I don't know what it is. There's some kind of affinity towards making the scene. Whenever there is a train scene, like a train fight scene, there's always that one person that's head is sticking out and they're coming up on something and they nearly escape. It's every single train scene. I don't know why. There's like a propensity for people to do that, and they do it in this one. And I laugh when I see it.
And why can't you just fight on the train? Why does everybody got to go to the roof?
Why?
Like on the train, if you fall, you get back up. On the roof, if you fall, you're a splat.
That would be a good Monty Python skit right there, where they're about to go up top and they're both the fire's like, hey, like we don't have to do that.
Why would we go there? Adam gets Abe down, and he's about to bite him, and he's got his teeth bared, and Abe's helpless at this point. And as he bites down, Henry arrives and sticks his arm in to take the bite and protect Abe, saving him from being turned to a vampire. Meanwhile, Vedoma has set a fire to a giant wooden trestle that the train has to cross. And this is actually kind of a beautiful, breathtaking scene. It's a huge trestle, and the whole thing, slowly lights up and ignites the whole night sky. It's really well done.
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Speed is killed through this battle. And we think he kind of was a traitor and he turned on Abe. But Adam, who now has basically possession of the train, finds that the train is full of rocks and there's no silver to be found. And we learn that it was all a ploy to trap Adam, and that Speed did not betray Abe. He was in on it the whole time, which is kind of refreshing because these people have been loyal friends and confidants, and you'd hate to see him.
Yeah.
So he did his part. The train is collapsing as it hits this burning trestle. And, Abe and Will are attacked by Adam. They're trying to run away. The train is collapsing as it goes, trying to basically outrun the fire. And as he approaches the two men, it seems they're lost and out of weapons. They're about to fall. It's all hopeless. Abe has his trusty silver pocket watch, and he drives the watch through Adam's chest. effectively killing him.
Yeah. Yeah,
The leader of the
a
vampires.
Bruce Lee punch right into his chest. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got the watch and he's got the chain wrapped around,
Yeah.
and he just and again, it's not that gory. It's more stylized, as you said. But
Yeah.
it was the train scene I thought was pretty well done, pretty
It
action
was cool.
packed.
I liked it. Yeah.
And they're struggling. The train's about to collapse. Henry helps them, and Henry, Abe, and Will barely make it off before the entire train crashes. Meanwhile, we see that Mary Todd and Harriet Tubman were moving the silver through the Underground Railroad. The train was just a complete diversion. And
which I think is awesome. Like here, like the Underground Railroad was used to funnel silver to kill vampires. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah, the Underground Railroad
I'll
succeeded
buy
where the
that.
real railroad failed.
It's true, Jerry. I read it on the internet.
Absolutely. They arrive to the front lines, and they're stocking up the soldiers and giving them all the silver, and kind of telling them what to do with it. But Mary recognizes Vidoma, who has kind of infiltrated the camp, and he recognizes her and she recognizes her, and there's about to be a confrontation, and Mary Todd shoots Vidoma in the middle of in the forehead with her son's toy sword, what he was playing with when she bit him, and the whole thing kind of just embeds in the middle of her forehead, and the chain is hanging out.
Yeah, it's cool.
It was she basically stuffed it down a musket and then blasted it.
Yeah, I was gonna say she puts it in a musket, and it's like they show her body, like they have a side shot, and like you can see her body like feet lifting up.
Yeah. Again, more action than gore, but well
but
done.
It's a good blend. Like it blends well.
Yeah. Armed with silver, the Northern soldiers kill the vampires. They turn the war to their favor. They win at Gettysburg, and they end up eventually winning the war. Again,
and then he gives the speech, and then they show Abe giving the Gettysburg speech because you need it.
Of course.
If you're having an Abe Lincoln story, I don't care what it's about. I don't care if it's in space. You got to have that speech.
Yeah. We cut to 2 years later. The war won. The vampires have pushed back. Many of them have left for Europe or South America, and kind of everything's under control. And we see Abe, he's been writing in a book the whole time. He's kind of like documenting everything he went through. And he gives the written account to Henry of everything he went through. And he leaves with Mary to go to the theater, which of course we know how that goes.
Yeah.
And but it was almost like a satisfied ending where he accomplished what he really needed to accomplish in his life.
Yeah. Well, Henry wants to make him a vampire, and he said there are certain things that last forever other than vampires, right? And he's talking about values and integrity, right? He's kind of showing like the character of what kind of person he was. Like, no, like the values that we set forth for this nation are going to last longer. Yeah. Or just as long as vampires, right? That's going to be more impactful. And that's kind of like the dichotomy he had with wanting to use politics and use violence, and like what's a more impactful way to do this? So it's actually well written.
Yeah. And it's true. Your legacy is forever.
Yeah.
So he declines, and he goes off to Ford Theater, and they don't show it. We know the rest. It's so engulfed in real history with this false narrative that we know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But we cut to modern day, and Henry is in a bar. Henry looks the same, of course. He hasn't aged a bit.
Yeah.
More modern haircut, perhaps, but he's in a bar, and he meets a young man drinking, who's dropping his gun.
Yeah.
Just
he's
as
like, I'll
Abe
have
once
another.
did.
Yeah.
And he delivers the same line. Anybody here drinking this much is either after a woman or out to kill somebody.
Kill man. Yeah.
And it's kind of message that the battle continues.
But yeah, the vampires never went away, and they're still involved. Right. And I was like, man, why didn't they make another one of these?
Yeah. And again, the movie was met with mediocre reviews. I read some reviews that actually put down what I thought was its biggest strength was that it played it straight, because it is a silly premise. We all know it's a silly premise. If you if you go to a movie entitled Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, you expect a silly premise. But I actually liked how it didn't play it silly. It played it
I
completely
loved
straight.
it. I loved it. I didn't want to see a silly movie. It's your, you know what I mean? Like this isn't a comedy. This isn't Scary Movie 6. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to see a silly premise and I wanted to see it be done seriously, and they executed it perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, the movie's not without its flaws. Some of the CGI is a little wonky. It is just
we nitpick every movie. You can nitpick every movie.
Of course.
It's really it's.
I thought this movie was a lot of fun. I liked it when it first came out. I loved the book. I thought it was a super entertaining read.
I want to read the book now.
and like it was just a good movie. It doesn't. It's not serious. It's just, hey, what if history was this different instead? And it's fun.
And you know what? What a great accolade to a movie. If someone asks me my opinion on a movie and I say, hey, it's a fun movie to watch, I mean, what better thing to hear, right?
Yeah.
Like you can hear things like, well, it's intense, it's emotional, it's horrific, it's visceral. There's a lot of things you can describe movies that I'm like, well, I guess I'll have to be in the mood for that, right? But if I just say a movie's fun, like, I mean, what's a great accolade? It's just a fun movie to watch.
Sure. And you could argue, they just released this week, in fact, the all-time ranking of presidential standings by political scholars and historians.
Yeah.
And Abe Lincoln was number one, as he usually is.
Wow.
And you can think, well, it's true what he says, even in this ridiculous movie, that legacy is forever.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. That's interesting. That's a
I
good
would rank him
right
even
there.
higher if this tale was true.
You're one of the greatest human beings ever.
You can't compete with that. But
yeah, you can't.
just a fun movie and a perfect topper for presidential horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely.
Fun topic. Something different.
Yeah. Something different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's our show for this week. Presidential horror for President's Day 2024. Hope you enjoyed it. We are the Weekly Horoscope. We'll be back. We'll see you next time. I'm Jerry. That's Matt. Everyone have a good one. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Thank you, everyone.
Your Weekly Horoscope with Jerry and Matt.